Welcome to Dave Talks Some More, the podcast at the intersection of humor and, hey, I'm your host, Dave, and together we'll explore a riveting world of mundane topics with unparalleled indifference. So get ready for a riveting journey through,
whatever.
This is Dave Talks Some More. All right, far out. Thank you for joining us. This is called The Show. There's no way this is going to work, but we're trying to make it. We've got a special guest, Cliff Osbon, joining us, and then we've got old regular Sean Guy is just walking around Austin looking for a homeless encampment to live in, and we've got young Dabs.
Yeah, can I just say I'm trying to enunciate my words today. So if I sound like I'm talking weird, that's my practice.
You sound like you're trying to pass a field sobriety test.
Yeah, well,
is pretty much the
I
vibe
mumble.
that you're giving us. Sean, did you find a place? Did you find your own cardboard box? You okay? No.
Yes, we're getting set
Better
up.
sound.
All right. Well, that's actually working better. Cliff, welcome to our chaos.
Thanks. It's great to be here, I think.
Yeah, really. Well, let me start with you. You're kind of the new guy on the block. Can you give us the 30-second intro to who Cliff is and what Cliff does?
Yeah, I'm Cliff Osbon. I'm an old guy, a husband, a father, and a grandfather, and a friend, and a bunch of things like that. Went to pharmacy school a million years ago.
Oh, wow.
We sold a company that I ran for a few years, and since then, the last 6 or 7 years, been involved in some other startups, one of which a couple of people in the room here have asked me about, which is the medical marijuana industry. I'm happy to talk about that as if I were knowledgeable or anything else.
Can I ask you a question? Where's your accent from?
You know, I grew up not too far from here, over in Monroe, Louisiana. I've lived around the southeast and south central
it's
U.S.
Kind of a Cajun.
No.
I just maybe a recovering redneck accent.
It sounds like northeast.
North Louisiana's got its own accent. Jimmy Swaggart has got the North Louisiana accent real heavy as anyone I've ever met. Yours isn't close to how heavy Swaggart's is, but
and I don't bring all the baggage that he brings.
Thank God for that.
Yeah.
But he made the money, God knows. So there you go. Speaking of pharmacy, do you have any recommendations for how to deal with the pollen? Because here in the deep South, the pollen we're covered up in bees and yellow jackets, and all the wasps are out. And it doesn't matter how many times you wash your car; it's going to turn yellow within 6 hours. Any ideas on how to deal with it?
And my car was black when I left the house over in Rankin County, and by the time I got here, it was green from all the yellow pollen on top of it. But no, I take an antihistamine every day. I use Flonase every day. I do all that I can to overcome that. But I think if you have the means, the best way to deal with the pollen is to move.
I have it's like a gallon size thing you can squirt in your nose, and it's really good.
A gallon size?
Well, not
thing?
like a maybe a quart. I don't know. It's like one of those
nasal irrigation.
Thank you. But what is the thing you clean your teeth with that shoots water?
A water pick?
Yeah. It's like that, but it has like a nasal adapter, and you just squirt water up your nose, and it really helps.
In Europe, they don't treat sinus infections with antibiotics like we do here, and instead everybody irrigates, and it just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but as you grow older, don't you lose your sinuses?
Not that I'm aware of.
Is that true?
No one knows.
I mean, I used to have terrible sinuses as a kid, and pollen and grass and all of that. I haven't had a need for any type of pollen or allergy medication in 20 years.
That's awesome.
I've actually gone in the opposite direction. I never had a problem with pollen until the last 3 or 4 years. I'm glad that we're starting off the podcast with everybody talking about their ailments. So that's we got some old people stuff going. Sean, what are you doing in Austin?
Well, I'm here visiting Sydney, my daughter, and just having some, 3 or 4 days doing father-daddy stuff, I guess. I hadn't seen her since Christmas, so I figured I'd come out here. And
any highlights of the trip so far?
Well, yes, I spent too much money doing some shopping yesterday, which I never really do. Got a new hat.
Yeah, what's the, yeah,
What does it say? We can't read it.
Well, it says Sendero Provisions, Spirit of the West, Soul of the Wild, which I do have kind of a spirit of the West, and I definitely have a soul of the
Why did
wild.
you
So I
pick
like
that out?
because it looks
Got it.
good.
does it?
No, I think so. Anyway, Sydney liked it, and her friend liked it, and so I bought it. We went to a great sushi restaurant. I know we haven't eaten any barbecue yet,
That
but
kills
that is
me.
on
That
the
you are in the barbecue capital of the Southwest, and you have not hit it
yes.
yet at all. That's a shame.
Well, I'm going to. So, we did yesterday. We kind of toured on South Congress. If you're
Oh,
familiar with Austin, it's an area that's very popular, and people walk the streets, and so it's nice. Today we've not really done much of anything, so I had to recover from the 3 a.m. flight yesterday
did you hit the
morning.
food trucks at all?
Not yet, but we bought some ice cream yesterday, so
It's a start.
kind of similar. That's right.
I wanted Cliff to come in for a lot of reasons, but one of them is I really want to jump into this topic because I think it's to me it's very interesting. Cliff knows some things about the medical marijuana industry, if that's the word for it. I don't know if you're involved in or exactly how you want to jump into the topic, but you know some stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm happy to talk about it a little bit. You want me to kind of start with how we ended up with the medical marijuana program here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, I mentioned I went to pharmacy school and haven't practiced pharmacy for a few years, still licensed, but we sold our company back in January 2018, and a local guy who really wanted to work hard to legalize medical marijuana, had no interest in legalizing recreational marijuana, was looking for people to invest in that effort because it took a little money to do that. There was a ballot initiative, a public referendum where we got paid people to go out and get signatures, got enough signatures to get on the ballot. And in November of 2020, 74% of Mississippians voted in favor of a clearly defined medical marijuana program. And then the next May, our Supreme Court said, nope, that's not constitutional. We got you on a technicality here. And so they shut that down. And so, along with a lot of other people, we continued to work with folks in the legislature. And the next year, the legislature gave us a program that became operational in January of 22. So now we're a couple of years into it. I'm sorry, January 23, it became operational. The first product was sold in. So we're a couple years in, slow start. Happy to talk about that and reasons why people think that's the case. But we have this huge industry built out in the state to serve people with one of about 22 conditions that are approved for medical marijuana use.
You said that the ballot initiative, I think you said the ballot initiative is not about recreational marijuana. But the impression that I have is the way that it works, not much of a difference. If you want to be a recreational user, it's no big task to get the card, and then it's wide open. You can use it for anything you want to.
I think you could make that argument. We do have a very clearly defined process where you have to see a prescriber, a physician, physician's assistant, nurse practitioner who's qualified with the state through an educational program to evaluate you and make sure you have one of these 22 diagnoses in your medical record. Then once they certify that, you fill out a online form with the Department of Health, and it matches up with the one that your prescriber, or not prescriber, but your healthcare provider filled out, and you get approved if you meet the Department of Health's criteria. What people do with the product beyond that point, I suppose the same things could happen that happen with legal benzodiazepines or legal opioids or alcohol. People could abuse the
What are the
product.
22? I mean, you don't have to remember all 22, but I've had patients that take it for sleep. Is that an indication?
Not in Mississippi.
So
that's interesting. There's been a move over the last couple of years to try and get the legislature to add insomnia and anxiety. And throughout history, humans have self-medicated with cannabis or marijuana for those two things. But the 22 diagnoses we have, chronic pain, PTSD, multiple sclerosis, cancer, kind of adjunct treatment to cancer. It doesn't treat the cancer, but maybe some of the symptoms, the nausea and things like that. Seizure disorders, irritable bowel syndrome, and I named 6, so there are 16 more I couldn't think of on the spot.
Is your impression that anybody who wants to be a recreational user can find the doc that's going to give them the card, kind of like 5 or 6 years ago, if you wanted the pain pill, you could find the doc who could give you the pain pill?
I'm not sure if that's true, but I'll answer that as best I can, but let's back up a few years before that. When my mother was dying with a brain tumor, my brother, an Assembly of God pastor, said, "Cliff, can we get mom medical marijuana? She's suffering so much." She lived in Georgia at the time. She was in long-term care and hospice. And I said, "Dude, no one in America is more than 2 phone calls and 15 minutes away from getting all the marijuana they want and can pay for. That's not legal,
Yeah.
but that's the way it works in our country." I said, "The problem is if you give it to her, you lose your license to preach. I'll lose my license to practice pharmacy. The nursing home and the hospice lose their licenses because there's no legal program in Georgia." Now, your question was not about that, but I would say people have been able to get marijuana as long as they wanted to. The biggest open secret in America is that 1 out of 3 to 1 out of 5 adults that you encounter every day are a user of marijuana.
Really? Do you think it's that much?
That's what the statistics say.
Wow.
I haven't run a poll, but that's what the stats say.
But now I have a question. So are you talking about that in terms of legally or
I believe that
illegally?
the number is illegally in states where it's not legal. Somewhere between 1 in 3 and 1 in 5 adults uses the product, somewhere between once a day to once a year.
But those statistics are not people that need it
That's true.
medically.
Those are, well, yes and no.
I mean,
Oh, there's a theory.
I mean, it would include that.
There's a theory
right?
that says many of the people that are using marijuana illegally are self-medicating for some medical condition where they found that the product helps them.
Well, I mean, I would say as a former, I mean, I've been sober 37 years and I smoked a hell of a lot of marijuana in my time before I got sober. And if you had asked me at any point in time before I got sober, did I need it for medical reasons? I would tell you I 100% needed it for medical reasons, and I didn't. So I'm just curious as to, I mean, one of the questions that I have, and I talked to David about this pre-show, was, I mean, really, who is going to stop someone from using it recreationally in terms of coming up with some sort of diagnosis
Sean,
that
if
they can
I think your point was even without it being legal, people were using it anyway.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
Listen.
I think there's a really interesting question here this doesn't really have to do with the medical marijuana program, but it just has to do with our life experience as humans. If someone is in the privacy of their own home and is being told by someone affiliated with the government what they can and cannot do with their body in the privacy of their own home that affects no one but them, the important question is who owns their body, them or the state? And if they can't make that decision about whether they want to drink alcohol or use cannabis or stand upside down in the corner on their head all day because someone else who's a bureaucrat or an elected official says they can't, there's an important question there. What rights do they have, and how did they lose those rights?
Well, look, I mean, let me just say, I have no issue with people. I voted for it in Mississippi as someone who's been sober for as long as I have. I don't have a problem with someone using it. I don't have a problem with them using it recreationally or medicinally. I just feel like the system that we have in place is really just kind of a sham.
I think
it's not really,
Sean, I think you could really make that argument easily about some states, and I'm not going to pick on Oklahoma, but in Oklahoma, 1 out of every 10 Oklahomans has a medical marijuana use card, and it's estimated that card sharing roughly doubles that. So now we're back to the 1 out of 5 American adults using the product.
But they're living in Oklahoma. I mean, if you live in Oklahoma, I can't. Come on, Oklahoma, Nebraska. I think absolutely.
Come on, David. We're both originally from Louisiana, and people want to throw down on us, so we got to go easy on these other folks.
I'm trying to assert my ability to talk, as we were told last time. I have a question though. So I see it. I haven't read the research on it, but there are some negative aspects of long-term use, including increased anxiety, decreased pain control, increased overall pain. What is your knowledge of the long-term side effects of this, because if you're treating cancer, that's kind of a short-term
Mhm.
thing. If you're treating anxiety or insomnia, that can be a very long-term problem, and I agree with you on benzos and narcotics, but those are coming out now as huge problems, the benzo use and the
Yeah, I think there are potential problems with all those products, excuse me, but, in terms of increased levels of pain with marijuana, we don't really have any good evidence that people's pain levels increase.
So I find, and I think I've read a paper on it, I'm pretty sure I tell people I have, so I'm hoping I have, that after anesthesia, it is a lot harder, actually, I do have papers on this, to control post-op pain in people that smoke marijuana, and I go ahead and I tell my patients, "Let me tell you, you take marijuana, it's gonna be a lot harder for me to control your pain post-op."
That's interesting. I haven't seen that, but I'd love to see it.
Does
Yeah.
that mean you're gonna be in more pain?
Yeah, because you get a lot of people that are like, "Oh, I'm hurting, you're not treating it." And maybe it has to do with the pain pathways and what's available. I mean, we can't treat it with pot. So, I
Well,
mean,
maybe if y'all had a
maybe if I
smoking
could, it would be different,
if
but
y'all had a smoking room in the recovery room, like a separate smoking area like they do in
yeah, or IV
restaurants.
would be easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
But, and it may really be something to do with that, that the pain pathways are, altered.
But there clearly are some potential side effects associated with marijuana use, such as hyperemesis syndrome, where this product, marijuana, that can relieve nausea in people with chronic use and high levels of use could actually cause excessive nausea and vomiting. So that is a risk. Um,
Wait. Let me make sure I understand this. So, but you would smoke weed or however you want to ingest it, the THC, for the purpose of reducing your uh, nausea, and then you're saying that the increased use of it would actually increase
it
your
could in
nausea.
some patients. It's not common, but it does happen. Yeah. And
Interesting.
other problems you mentioned, Dabs, the anxiety, and that's true. There are some folks that are really susceptible to that, and it seems that there may be the clue there may be in the terpenes. So I'm going to really nerd out. It's really early in the podcast, but nerding out here. Um, Delta 9 THC is the active ingredient that most of us think about in marijuana that causes most of its benefits or side effects, as the case might be. But there are hundreds of other products called terpenes, and they're these aromatic compounds like we smell in black pepper, lavender, papaya, mango, things like that. Some of those occur in marijuana, and they have their own therapeutic benefits. And some of those terpenes are more likely to cause anxiety than others. So if a patient is picking a strain of marijuana that has lower levels of those terpenes, they may be able to avoid the anxiety. The challenge with black market product is nobody really knows what terpenes are
Mhm.
present. And the advantage with legal medical marijuana is the terpenes have been analyzed by a lab, and that's the business that we're involved in.
well, that you raised a point earlier that I always think of when the subject of legalization comes up, which is you give any fifth grader a $20 bill and a cell phone in 30 minutes, he can have whatever drug you name. Give him by the end of that 30 minutes, he can have that. So the idea of legalization, we're somehow encouraging people to get, hey man, people can get any drug that they want anytime that they want for cheap. And an argument that I've often heard is at least if you legalize something, you know that there's some safety built into it. Whereas if you make alcohol illegal, people are going to get whatever wood grain alcohol that makes them go blind. And, you know, yeah, somebody can be an alcoholic, but at least when they go to the liquor store, the liquor itself is safe stuff. You're abusing it, but the liquor itself is safe stuff. You go to the pot store, and as you say, there's different strains, and you know that it's safe. It hadn't been laced with anything. And, you can talk about the different levels of terpenes and the different, potency of it. And, you're not just getting some weed off the street and God only knows what's in it. And then you talk about other drugs, you really don't know what's in the street drug. Whereas when you get the legal drug, hey, you shouldn't be using it. And I get it, but you are going to use it because you're that kind of guy. at least you're not going to get killed because the drug itself, had some impurities thrown in by a drug dealer.
And that's oh, I'm sorry.
I just was to say I agree with that point, but go ahead.
No, and I think that's why countries like Portugal have decided to tackle the war on drugs very differently than America has. It's a risk minimization strategy, which recognizes that humans like to use these mind-altering products. How can we do that in a way that causes the least damage to them, to others, to the children that are dependent upon them, et cetera?
Yeah, but the other side of the argument is the more harm prevention that you put into policy of, hey, we're going to make marijuana legal so that you know that the marijuana is not altered somehow. Uh, you're you are tacitly encouraging people to use it. If you hand out condoms so that people don't get AIDS, you're encouraging people to have sex. If you give junior high school kids sex education, that's good in its way, but also it's normalizing the idea of teen sex, which is not. If you hand out needles to heroin addicts, you're encouraging heroin use and you're normalizing that, and on down the line. And I can't perceive how in more conservative states the idea is, I would rather not normalize the behavior. Yeah, it's a trade-off, and, the trade-off that we've adopted here in the South is, I don't wanna normalize that behavior, even though that means the people that practice it are gonna get into some seriously unsafe situations.
David, you allude to one of the questions that I had, and uh, I think it was brought up earlier that you were saying in Mississippi, the start of medical marijuana has been slow. Did I hear you correctly when you
Yeah,
said that? Correct?
so there's a huge consulting company out in Denver. Vicente Cedarberg started a law firm, and they advise so many states and countries on their drug policy that they now have this large consulting arm. And the group of folks that helped bring the ballot initiative to us, we worked with that consulting group. And they looked at states like ours, similar demographics, similar population, looked at what the uptake of medical marijuana cards was over years 1, 2, and 3, and began to forecast what that might look like in Mississippi.
Hmm.
And the consensus was, in most states that are relatively conservative, as our state is, it looked like about 3 years in, 3% of the population would be holding a medical marijuana card. And so in Mississippi, that would be about 100,000 folks. But as it sits last week, we were at 53,000, and we're 2 years in. So it's
Really?
been a little bit slower start.
I would like to say that I'm not related to the Dabs pot dispensaries, despite the fact that that is my name.
Well, I know this, that my wife and I looked at, and some of my friends looked at some investment opportunities here in Mississippi, and we intentionally, after looking at it, we chose not to invest because of the very thing that you're talking about, in terms of, we just didn't see the growth potential that was being forecasted by some of these people that were seeking investment
Wait,
opportunities.
wait,
It seemed really, I don't
Hunter,
know. It was almost like
did you just say you thought about investing and helping the medical marijuana? Okay.
yeah. I mean, I'm all for making some money. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean,
It's just so like, I mean, what would Billy have thought?
Well, I think Billy would have invested with me if the investment was right. But the problem was that everyone that we saw investment projection numbers for, they had these crazy numbers that honestly we just didn't see. Fortunately, I have one of my partners has a family member that's involved, and the growth that they had out in California and Colorado was very different from what really was anticipated here. And they even had some issues out in Colorado, that the growth wasn't really what they thought it was going to be. And is that correct in terms of what you know
Well,
of,
yeah,
Philip?
I don't know much about the Colorado and California experience, but I do know that here, since the growth has been slower, for an investor like me, who believes that people should have access to this product, um, I've been disappointed. Our lab, there are 2 functioning testing labs in Mississippi right now. Ours is located in Flowood. It's called Steep Hill, Mississippi. There's one in DeKalb, just north of Meridian, called Alchemy Analytics. Both are good labs. Gosh, if you got to compete with somebody, you want to be able to compete with folks like the other lab I named. They're honest, they're ethical, they're proficient. But our lab's got about 70% market share, and we're not returning money to investors yet. So the market's just very small.
Wasn't there a lab that just got shut down because they weren't quite following the rules?
There was a lab in Natchez that their license was suspended in December of 2023, and it was revoked a few months later.
Wow.
I would like to ask, we have some farmland in South Carolina, and we actually looked in, not me, my mom and her brother, sisters looked into growing marijuana. We've since looked into another controversial issue, but evidently we had to have a fence to keep people from coming in, and we just didn't want to fork out the money.
Well, you know,
you think?
Well, you know, because marijuana is illegal federally,
I'm kidding.
which is a whole fascinating story to talk about that history. Each state chooses to either carve out a legal program or not. And in Mississippi, all medical marijuana must be grown indoors in a secured facility. And that's true in most states. It's indoor grows.
Well, they had a problem with Uncle Dickie's bonfire right by the field. So I don't.
A lot of people were interested in Uncle Dickie's bonfire, baby. Taco Bell did a booming business.
Say Waffle House opened a location next door,
right next to Dickie's house.
Yeah.
Why do you think it is that Mississippians just aren't that interested in getting their card?
Well, I've got a lot of opinions on a lot of things, which makes it super fun to be a guest on a podcast.
Yeah,
because they don't have to be right; they just have to be verbalized.
Have to be controversial.
They just have to be spoken out loud. We have really strong prohibitions against advertising medical marijuana in Mississippi. There's zero tolerance for advertising. A dispensary where the product is sold to the patient can lose their license for advertising. And I still believe if we go to Chick-fil-A, well, we're not going today. If we go to Chick-fil-A tomorrow and I stand there with a ball cap that says pollster, hold a clipboard and ask the first 100 people that walk in, do you think medical marijuana will ever be legalized in Mississippi? I think half of them are going to say no.
Wait, I thought it already was.
It has been.
Exactly.
And I think half of them, I think awareness is so very low. I don't
think so. I think everybody is pretty well aware that there are medical cards out there to be had and that they're not hard to get.
A lot of people are aware. Yeah, so we could go back and forth on the number, but I still think there are a lot of people that aren't aware that there's a program. And I have people ask me all the time, multiple times, how do I get my card? I said, I'm going to send you to a website, go read the instructions, call this clinic because they certify patients and they'll determine if you meet the criteria or not.
So how much money are those clinics? Because that's where these pill mills come from. It's all about money.
Yeah, I know with opioids, the phrase pill mill, in case the listeners aren't familiar, is a place where patients can easily get a prescriber to write them a prescription for OxyContin or whatever the drug might be. Here, the prescriber or they're not prescribing medical marijuana, they're certifying. The certifying physician or nurse practitioner sees the patient once a year, and they get one fee for that, whether they approve them or not. So it removes some of that financial incentive to keep a patient on the product that might exist with opioids.
Why once a year compared to once a month with pretty much every other controlled substance?
Because that's a great question. Because I keep saying the prescriber, the provider, the physician or nurse practitioner is not prescribing the product when it's medical marijuana. They're only saying once a year that Bob or Sally meets the criteria set forth by the Department of Health. They've reviewed their medical records. They've given them an exam. They've had a consultation, and they say that Bob or Sally meets the criteria. Then the patient begins their own journey to the dispensary to find the product that's beneficial for them. And that's such a different model for us, you as a physician, me as a pharmacist. We think about a model where the physician makes the diagnosis, determines the best course of treatment, discusses that with the patient, gets them on board, and then writes a prescription for a very specific product and dose that only a pharmacist can dispense. This is a very different model of care.
How many forms of medical marijuana are there?
Well, there are a lot. I mean, flower, which is, what everybody wants to call weed.
I don't mean like the way you ingest it, but like the different strains, if you will. What do you call them?
I don't. Yeah, that's the way to put it. The
Like
strains.
if you go to a pot dispensary, they don't just ask, do you want to chew it or do you want to smoke it? There's all these different.
The first thing that they say, because I've been in, I've listened to it, they'll say, what brings you in today? What are you trying to accomplish? And then the person says, I have PTSD. And they say, okay, what have you tried in the past? What's worked for you? Because a lot of people have experience with this product, even when it was illegal. And they start from there. And then they talk about, are you looking for something that is sedating or something that's more uplifting? Because there are strains that accommodate that based on the terpenes present. And they begin to try and narrow it down. Again, it's a very different process from the physician, patient, pharmacist triad that we're all used to.
And who is that guy? What are his qualifications?
They do have an educational program that's required. It's nowhere as extensive as we see with healthcare providers.
So let me get this straight. You're saying that the patient determines how much they're going to smoke, when they're going to smoke, and there's no regulation
if they choose to smoke. There's a limit on how much quantity of product they can buy a month. And that's kept up with in what's called a seed to sale system. And it doesn't matter how many dispensaries they go to, they all tap into the same system that the Department of Health has that determines if that patient has units left that they can purchase.
Well, that's
okay. So there is some regulation.
That's not really that much different from if you go and you say, well, I'm depressed, and you get started on a medicine and you're like, well, I'm really tired now. And so they might give you something that's a little less just, tiring.
Right. But I think in the system that you and I are most familiar with, physician, patient, pharmacist, the physician is going to make that decision. And as Sean asked, wait, the patient's doing this, and that is just a whole different paradigm. But physicians are probably not going to prescribe this product. Certainly they cannot in Mississippi.
If I were willing to use it, I would be a great patient, by the way.
I think you'd be very active. But what the physician does is he says, I'm going to approve you for a card. And then it's you and the guy behind you're the patient, the patient and the guy behind the counter who's had some kind of online course is going to design the strain and the potency and everything else. And the doctor is completely out of the picture.
And that does sound very odd, but we as adults do make other similar choices. We talked about bourbon this week, you and I like a few different bourbons. Some people like beer, some like tequila, some like wine, and people make those decisions about which product they like and which they feel enhances their experience.
That's what takes it out of this is medical marijuana and more into what I've always understood it to be is, come on, man, this is something to palliate the Baptist in the legislature. And if you want some recreational dope, get a card and you can get the good stuff that is safe, and you can have it delivered to your house, which you can. And get the gummies or whatever you want. Cause I've had clients who allegedly have gotten the gummies delivered to their house, and it's just another form of alcohol, but it's weed instead of alcohol.
Can we talk about home delivery? Is that okay?
Hit it.
Okay. So home delivery in Mississippi is not medical marijuana. It is not tested, regulated product. It is product that comes through a loophole, and there is some scary, scary stuff that's for sale out there. Our labs bought some with our own money, tested it, found toxic levels of pesticides, inaccurately labeled dosage strength. There's a myriad of problems with that. It's sold through a loophole from the 2018 Farm Bill that says you can grow hemp in a field. You can get a license from the USDA to grow hemp. And as long as it doesn't have more than 0.3% Delta-9 THC by weight, there's another nerd alert, then you can sell it. And so what people are doing is taking that and putting it into gummies and sodas and things like that and selling it through that loophole. And you can get it in convenience stores. If you pay at the pump, you don't see it. If you go inside, like I did on the way here at a place we won't say exactly where because I don't want to disparage them, but very close to here, there's a glass case at the register in the convenience store, and they've got 58 kinds of THC containing products.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because I did not realize until a few years ago that kratom and some of the other similar chemicals were absolutely available at a gas station near you, and that it has a similar effect to, oh God,
Kratom is similar to the opioids.
yeah, similar to the opioids. And I know that there's some people who say kratom has gotten me off of the opioids. But again, we're getting into some really strong medically related chemicals that this isn't a cup of coffee, man.
Yeah.
This is some really strong stuff. And it seems like the state is, for better or worse, is sliding into legalizing going back to 1905 when you could get cocaine if you wanted to. You can get anything you want.
It was in
and
your
it's up to
Coca-Cola.
you.
It was in your Coca-Cola
Right,
back then,
exactly.
right?
I'm still trying to get a lawyer to help me prosecute the Diet Coke addictive policy.
Right.
No,
Well,
I'm dead serious. I'm trying.
And then that brings up the argument that eventually gets raised, which is, you know what? You're talking about adults and people that are going to abuse much harder drugs like heroin. They're going to use it. And for the same reason that having safe marijuana is better than street marijuana and safe liquor is better than wood grain alcohol out of a still, safe heroin and safe needles and safe crack and safe whatever, it's better than what you get off the street, and they're going to use it anyway. And the whole idea of prohibition, I'm just raising an argument. The whole idea of prohibition is I want to save Cliff from himself and from making bad decisions. And at least I'm going to keep him from dying from the unsafe part of the drug. And at least he'll be using the safe street drug because he's going to use the drug anyway.
I'm well familiar with that argument, but let's look at the examples of prohibition with which we're all familiar and decide if they work in America or not. Gambling prohibition in Mississippi. We only had to go over to the Gold Coast between Jackson and Pearl a few years back to see that gambling prohibition did not work, and it consolidated money and power in the hands of criminals. Alcohol prohibition in America did not work. It consolidated money and power in the hands of the criminals. Marijuana prohibition has not worked. None of those forms of prohibition have worked because adults are going to pay for what adults want. Can we create a safe and legal way for people to have a legitimate medical need was the question that we ask. And the people that were involved in that effort to bring that to Mississippi were attorneys and physicians and pharmacists and engineers and just a lot of people that happened to believe that this was going to be better than the old situation that we had. Many people disagree.
It becomes an argument for hard drugs. It becomes an argument for legalizing prostitution. For making gambling completely legal and not as regulated as it already. I mean, this whole fiction that you've got to be on a navigable body of water to make a blackjack bet. Are you kidding me? And then it has to be on the boat. I mean, we finally got off of that. But again, I'm not espousing anything, but I'm saying the argument becomes adults are going to do what adults are going to do. And at least let's make it safe so that, gambling can destroy your life. So can alcohol, so can hard drugs, so can whatever. But we can at least give you safe alternatives so that you didn't die because you got shot by a drug dealer.
Milton,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Dad.
No,
Milton Friedman, one of America's greatest, economic minds, said from a strictly economic point of view, it appears that the war on drugs only accomplishes one thing: to give power to the cartels.
Mm.
Yeah.
Let me jump in here. I've been listening with myself on mute, so a couple of points. One is, first and foremost, that, you can prohibit all you want, but at the end of the day, the drug addict is going to do what the drug addict wants to do. For example, so a friend of mine's son has been hospitalized twice in the last 6 months from smoking weed pens that have about somewhere close to about 85 to 90% THC content. and the rest of the content in the pen are these chemicals that they don't know what they are, but they're causing massive psychotic events for the users of these dab pens or these weed pens. I mean, so of course that's what you're saying is coming through a loophole. Is that correct?
I'm not sure
Cliff?
where your friend or friend's son, if I tracked along, is getting that product. I'm not sure that's coming through a legal licensed dispensary or if it's some of that gas station weed, as I call it.
Well, it's coming from gas stations is where they typically
We had
get
a
it
real
from.
crisis just a few years ago, if you guys remember, with vape cartridges where
That's another thing. There's no way that those vapes are, I mean, you might as well just be taking poison. Those things gotta be, there's no way that they're not just absolutely murderous.
And addictive, so much more addictive than
than just regular cigarettes.
But
make it legal. What the hell?
Yeah,
you know?
I personally have a lot of concerns about vaping and about consuming combustible cannabis flower, which is smoking weed.
Yeah.
Because those don't seem like the best choices to me for most people. If someone's in a medical marijuana program, it seems to me like the drops or the edibles where they can titrate the dose and get a known amount each time is probably a better idea for a lot of patients. But there are a lot of patients who are very product experienced who are going to argue with me on that. I'm probably just a nerdy pharmacist and just can't get out of that mindset.
Well,
yeah, but let me say this: the cost of medical marijuana is significantly more expensive than what people can get on the street. Correct?
I've never bought any on the street, so I'm not sure. But the price,
a dime for a bag.
The price right now for an 1/8 of an ounce, 3.5 grams of flour in Mississippi probably is around $30 mark or a little higher.
Sean, how does that compute to your?
Well, I mean, when I bought an ounce back in 1987 and 88, it was, $100.
A lot cheaper then.
And maybe that's the reason that Mississippi hasn't gone so hard medical marijuana is I can get street weed so much cheaper.
30 for an 1/8 is a phenomenal price. That's
what I was saying. It's a good price.
Yeah, and look, and I don't work in a dispensary, and if I misquote price, I'm sure there are plenty of listeners who can fact check me and say that dude Osbon didn't know what anything
There
cost.
are plenty of listeners who are like, these people are the most naive ninnies in the world.
That's
I need to come on that podcast and set them straight on what the drug world's really
But we do not believe in facts necessarily on this show, just opinions.
No, God, no. Facts are for suckers.
Yeah.
I stumbled into the right room.
All that we want are opinions, and the more controversial, the better.
They don't even
Bad opinions are better than good opinions. Yeah. And speaking of opinions, we've got people who know something about the sober community. What's the argument against screw it, just legalize it all because people are going to do it anyway? From the sober community, there's got to be some argument.
For you're saying that the sober community doesn't want it legalized?
I would presume. Am I wrong?
Well, I mean, alcohol's legal.
Well, all right.
I mean,
let me
whether it's legal or not has nothing to do with whether or not you need to stop.
We've talked about the arguments for, make prostitution legal, heroin legal, crack cocaine legal.
Prostitution
make it,
is legal. It's called marriage.
Make it all. Oh, wow. That's an entire another hour. That's an entire another hour. Yeah,
I'm going to stay away from that
all
subject.
Legal. And at least we know that it's safe. I would have thought that the sober community would have a contrary opinion, or at least people in it would say that's the worst idea ever. Surely.
Well, I mean, let me say this. The only thing that the sober community, and I don't speak for the sober community, I can speak for myself only, but I would say that the only issue that I have is this notion that, you can be sober and you can smoke as much weed as you want. Well, I mean, I completely and totally disagree because I can assure you this, I don't want my doctor smoking a bunch of weed and coming and operating on me. I don't want my lawyer, although I am a lawyer, I wouldn't want my lawyer smoking a bunch of weed and going to court and arguing for me. I don't want my taxi driver smoking weed and driving me around in my Uber.
It's not legal. Even if I had a prescription for Dana, I just want to say I've sunk down in the chair, but I can't adjust myself because of the camera. What was I saying?
Even though it's not legal. Even though it is
did I
legal.
have a point?
Yeah, I'd like to hope
You did not have a point. You just wanted to interrupt
Probably,
me.
but
Everybody
I really did.
does.
I did have a point. What did you say? Because I really wasn't listening.
Well, clearly, you never listen to anything I have to say.
Oh, shoot. Well, y'all just keep talking. I'll come up with it.
All right.
So I'm not hearing any argument for anything other than screw it, legalize all of it. Because Cliff, you've talked about you draw a line between medical and recreational use. I'm not advancing any argument. I'm just discussing the idea of screw it. Just open the door to everything.
I remember what I was saying.
And make it legal.
Can I just remember?
Have at
Okay. So even if you have a legal prescription for whatever drug, you have one, doesn't mean that you can be working as a physician and still have it in your system. So if I had a prescription for marijuana, I can't be putting someone under high.
Right.
Just to clarify.
Agree.
Now, lawyers can evidently do whatever they want.
I'd like to hope so. That's why we make the rules.
Right.
And I'd like to agree with Dabs 100% on that. I don't think that people under the influence of any mind-altering substance should drive vehicles or care for children or make important decisions on behalf of clients.
But should you be able to get it and decide for yourself when and how much you're going to use heroin, crack, pick it, in anything?
That's the Portugal approach, which has worked well for them. And we could say maybe they have difference in their population, but in Portugal, if you're arrested with a small quantity of any drug like heroin or other horrible products, LSD or whatever, you're going to have to go into rehab. But that's different from locking mom or dad into prison and the kids losing their home and losing a parent. That seems to me that could be a better way to get the desired outcome, which is.
Well, no, if mom and dad are going to rehab, that's putting the kids in foster care. I'm talking about, look, go blow your brains out on and get high every weekend. Yeah, that's going to have consequences in your career. And if you show up to the courtroom drunk or at the operating table drunk, that's going to have consequences for your career. But
you can choose your actions, not your consequences.
You can choose when to get high and how much you're going to get high and the whole bit. But as far as your ability to go to the liquor store or go to the whorehouse or go to the casino or, whatever. And again, I'm not advocating it, but I surely thought I was going to get an argument that said that's stupid and here's why it's stupid. But nobody's telling me that that's a bad idea.
Well, we're talking about marijuana.
Well, I mean, the truth of the matter is
no. I'm saying, I think, okay, hold on. I sunk down so far in the chair. This chair is messed up. I think marijuana to me is not. Stop it. Get off my knee. I don't want people to know I'm injured. To me, marijuana isn't as dangerous as, say, alcohol.
Well, what? Okay, well, if it's not dangerous,
I disagree. Because let me tell you, I disagree.
Marijuana should be completely legal.
We just said it was
completely illegal. I don't have to go get a card. Yeah, I can just.
Look, I don't have a problem with marijuana being completely legal, but I disagree that it's not as bad as alcohol. I'll give you a great example. One night I was at a party and we'd been drinking, but we were really smoking a lot of weed. And me and a buddy go to get in the car and he's driving and he says, I can't drive. You're going to have to drive. And I said, dude, I cannot drive. And he said, no, really, you're driving. So I said, okay. So I went over there, I got in behind the wheel, and literally my hands went through the steering wheel. And I said, dude, my hands are going through the steering wheel. And he was like, get the hell out of there. You're not driving. And I was like, I tried to tell you, I can't
alcohol
drive.
And pot. You didn't say you were just smoking pot. So
and
I have hallucinated on just pot only.
And what county was this in? And approximately what date are we talking about, Sean?
No, but
I mean, look, the statute of limitations is long gone.
If you compare how people, and I don't know, I just, in my limited history, people drive a lot slower than they do
especially in Rankin County.
Like if they're
Imagine
stoned,
a
they're
Rankin
driving.
County
Well,
pothead.
if you're driving slow, you're a
I think
danger.
the default speed in the central Mississippi is 38 miles an hour.
By the way, you live in Rankin County.
I
Do
do.
you agree that the drivers in your county are as slow and lethargic as any in the state?
I'm not on the record agreeing with any bigoted statements.
Ooh, well, then you're in the wrong show.
Wow, you are on the wrong
show.
show. You can't admit something like that.
I think
I like you more and more.
I've lived a number of places.
Okay.
I have never lived anywhere where the average driver drives as slowly as where I live now.
Wow.
And that is
Okay,
central
there it
Mississippi.
is. Yes. Yes.
Well,
Cliff
not
for the
Sean.
win. Cliff for the
I
win.
don't think
Thank
people
you.
drive that slowly here.
The default speed seems to be 38 miles an hour.
Go across the spillway and tell me all about
Dabs,
it.
we're talking about
Right.
Rankin County drivers. They are
careful.
the slowest ones.
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
You're not driving a Honda Pilot, are you, Cliff?
No, you saw
Thank
I pulled up
God.
in.
Yes, exactly.
What's
Because
wrong?
he's a man. He would not be caught dead in that.
That's terrible.
I got a
I
lot
pushed
more.
my trash
I got a
down
lot more than that.
3 times this week after listening to the Man Card show.
Exactly, because it's the truth. So speaking of opinions and getting off of medical marijuana, I've always said that the best part of the show is before the show starts. And Cliff, you missed it because you weren't in the text thread, but we had this hour-long diatribe about Snow White and wokeism. Have you been following this thing about Disney has just
I know
lost
just this much about it.
200 million with an M?
Everybody hates it.
Yeah, everybody hates it. They dropped 250 into production. God only knows how much into distribution and advertising. And everybody is posting little videos of their online. You know how nowadays when you want to buy a movie ticket, you just go online.
Mm-hmm.
You can see how many seats are open, and you can pick. And everybody is posting no tickets sold, and it's 30 minutes before showtime.
Wow.
Everybody is not everybody, but a certain segment of the population is enjoying the hell out of Snow White, just absolutely tanking.
Yeah,
Have you seen any of this?
That population are bigots.
Wow, so I'm a
Why
bigot.
am I a bigot?
So
Because
I'm a bigot.
I'm just trying to get Sean. Oh, I didn't know I'd get Dave that riled
Yeah,
up. I was trying
so-
to get Sean riled up.
Sean's
Are you going to get Dave riled up?
well,
and
I'm going to give
our
Cliff
producer?
a
I was
chance.
just
Cliff,
trying.
have you seen this? Are you familiar
I've
with the
talked-
controversy?
I've talked too much since we got started.
No.
Oh no, you're here.
I'm familiar with it from social media. I know that there's criticism, and I don't see the reason to recreate a classic just to make a political or cultural statement. That doesn't make sense to me.
Cliff for the win.
And I don't want to invest my money with someone who is just looking to make a political or cultural statement.
Yes.
Who said that they were updating it to the times? I mean, think of all. Okay,
The crazy
To
actress
whose
said she was
Agatha
updating it.
Christie's. What is it called now? 10 Little Soldiers. What was the original title? Does anyone know?
I
10
am not
women
an
in the
Agatha.
kitchen.
Why would I?
10 Little N-words. That
What?
was the original title of that book. And so it has changed over time. It was 10 Little Indians for a while.
I don't think Snow White was problematic. It wasn't Snow White in the 7.
I'm just
other
saying
than the
it's not
dwarves.
unusual to update
Peter
things.
Dinklage got
The
made
Bible,
an
the
interesting
Bible has
problem.
been updated.
I'm gonna stop the podcast and I'm
It's
gonna
been
put my notes down.
It's been
and I
updated to
want you to-
modern language.
I
Let me
want
put
you
it
to
that way.
tell me about how the Bible has been updated.
No, I mean it's been
Have at
translated.
it.
It's been translated and not dumbed down, but made easily accessible. And it's not quite the same thing. I can see now that I've made that statement and you've called me out on it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
as I said earlier,
Sean's just smiling. He's so happy.
I'm
right
thrilled.
now.
I'm thrilled to be here. Maybe I can be an armchair theologian today.
Yeah.
So I was incorrect.
Cliff, tell me about
I was
the Bible
incorrect
being
in what-
updated.
Okay, I was wrong. It has been the language has been updated. Let me put it
The
that way.
translation has been
translation,
made
and this
more
is just a
accessible to
translation.
Well,
modern
hold
needs.
on. Time out. The Bible has not changed races of individuals. I mean, Disney in 2 movies that are currently out at the box office right now, they've changed Captain America to black, and they've changed Snow White, whose name derives from the fact that she is white
They're
as
talking about her
snow.
soul
They've
and
made her.
spirit, not
They've
her
made her
Yeah,
a
now they are.
Latino.
That's what they were talking about before. They weren't talking about her skin was white as snow. Who gives a damn?
It's the Brothers Grimm fairy tale. If you look at the old books that you can still find that, my grandmother had all the 1920s old books that had that smell. And Brothers Grimm's fairy tales, I read the hell out of it because it was very entertaining. And Snow White, because her skin was fair, which, for a long time, fair skin was, how do I put it? It was a mark of beauty, but really what it was a mark of wealth, because it meant
because you didn't have to be on the sun.
because you didn't have to be out in the sun. And so the fact that her skin was so white and she was a princess she was rich, and she was she was beautiful, and she had it all. And then her world collapsed because the evil, and the whole story. But to say that she wasn't Snow White, and she wasn't the fairest of them all because she was fair, in a terms of equality. I mean, that the original fairy tale was she was fair because they were talking about her skin color.
Okay, because it related to the fact that that meant she was wealthy. So I'm very pale, like very pale.
You're one of the fairest of them all.
And it is not a desirable trait. People comment all the time. So here you've updated it to the time.
Look at you, Dad.
Somebody asked me one time if I wore white hose, and I was like, no, those are just my legs. Why are you getting shut up, Danny? Why are you doing that? Anyway,
for those that are listening, we now have a close-up, a blinding close-up on Dab's really fair skin. Yeah.
Oh,
okay, so it's very shut up.
So anyway,
it's very white. But my point is, so since that is no longer a status symbol, so they made it more current to times. I mean,
they did.
I don't see anything wrong with that.
Making it more current to the times is fine. That's not why Snow White is getting.
Well, first of all, Sean said there was no prince and no dwarfs, which was clearly wrong.
No, they changed the whole purpose of the prince. Right. The dwarves are these terrible CGI creatures. But hold on, let me finish. Dabs. First of all, Peter Dinklage got in trouble 2 years ago for being upset about the fact that we used the term dwarfs, of course. And the great sketch out there from Ricky Gervais is that clearly Peter Dinklage is no longer happy. He's
grumpy.
Yeah, he's grumpy.
Grumpy.
See how pale my hands are?
So,
yeah, we got it, Dabs. We got it.
Well,
I'm sorry I pissed both Sean and Dave off.
I'm not pissed off. I'm highly amused. Yeah. Here's completely changing the subject. I'll get off of Snow White. Yeah, that'll make you happy. I noticed something about myself that I've noticed before, but I've become much more aware of it now, which is watching videos on social media. I've just recently become so attuned to how good they are, pissing me off, and that they are intended to piss me off. And I was watching a video of a cop giving a guy a ticket. Apparently it was completely undeserved, and the cop was just being a jerk about it. And I was just sitting, and I could just feel my face getting flush, and I was so pissed off. And that's, the media is all about pissing you off. Fox News and CNBC, they're trying to piss you off. A lot of Twitter accounts, they're trying to piss you off and make you mad. And I thought, I can't believe that I know what the game is. I know what they're trying to do. And I'm still like a child. I fall for it every time I sit there and I'm scrolling, and I'm just getting madder and madder as I'm reading it. And I'm thinking, why am I actually stopped watching the news for a while. Cliff doesn't know this, but when January 6th happened, I didn't know, because I'd completely stopped following the news because I was tired of getting pissed off. When October 7 happened in Israel, I did not know, because I'd completely stopped watching the news. I missed all the lawfare thing with Trump, and I've tried to quit the news and I didn't succeed, but I'm moving more and more towards, for my own, and I hate to use a millennial term, my own mental health. what the hell am I doing watching this crap?
Well,
All it does is piss me off.
The algorithm doesn't care whether you really, really love the content or really, really hate the content. The algorithm only cares that you watch the content and coincidentally see whatever advertisements follow.
Yes.
And so whether you're livid and just beside yourself or elated, it doesn't care. You're just watching. And I've had this conversation with my stepsons who are early 20s several times recently. The more you go back and look at that made you angry, the more you'll see. And then we all end up being those people stuck in the echo chamber, right? Where we're only seeing things.
We have discussed this.
Yeah. It's a real way of manipulating our emotions.
I feel manipulated.
There is a limited series on Netflix where they go through the OJ trial and they start with the relationship and then they go through the murder and they're going through the trial, and it's only 4 episodes, and I'm about a third of the way through the 4th episode. Cliff, you're old enough, I think, to remember the OJ experience as it was happening.
I'm almost always the oldest person in the room anymore.
How old are you?
63.
Okay, well, I'm 60, so we're
I was alive.
similar. Yeah,
I
you were alive.
I watched it on TV. I was in high school.
Yeah. Cliff will remember having conversations with people who insisted that if they were on the jury, their vote would be not guilty, and remembering how angry people would be having these, like, you got to be are you serious? You would vote not, and people would just get so and it was the table conversation for 2 years.
It was very divisive.
Ooh, was it? Yeah. And I'm watching that again, and I'm having that same frustration of, what the hell are you talking? Of course he's guilty. Of course well, no, because the blood evidence was tainted and they didn't follow the proper Yeah, I mean, so what? The guy's crazy how I'm reacting 20 or 30 years later.
If you watch news and you come away angry or afraid, they've achieved their objective, and you weren't really watching news.
No.
You were watching propaganda, and it might be MSNBC or it might be CNN or it might be Fox, and they all have a slightly different audience. Well, some of them don't have a lot of audience, but
yeah, MSNBC's just about lost it.
Yeah, but they all make different groups of people angry and afraid, and they all come away that way. And I'm like, I don't want to feel that way. I don't want that to be part of my human experience.
Where do you get news that isn't? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Where is it?
News Nation?
That's Fox.
No, I mean, News Nation they're the new channel. A group of investors bought the old Chicago network that used to give us Bozo the Clown, and their whole business model is to go back to the straight news reporting and really stay away from opinion.
Well, I'll have to check that out.
I am inching my way back towards. I would have answered your question. There is no such thing as just straight news, and I would love to say I'm out of the news. It turns out I'm more addicted to it than I thought, but I am noticing myself. And if we had another hour, we'd be talking about consciousness and
and auras and vibrations,
seeing your, and we're going to run out of time on that. But I am noticing in myself, you're really pissed off right now. You're really angry right now. You're plotting revenge against some cop in England who's literally, I'm sitting there thinking, how would I get even with this guy if he gave me that? And it's like, what are you doing? That's crazy.
And the news makes us hyper aware of events that are unlikely to affect us. Something very tragic, like mistreatment of a child. There was a time we would have never heard those tragic stories from Omaha, Nebraska, because if they were in the newspaper, they would have been on page C12.
Right.
But now, some story of that sort is going to run every 30 minutes on CNN headline news or Fox headline news or what have you. And we're going to hear the same thing over and over. And so our anger and fear level just tends to get escalated by that kind of manipulation.
Do you watch the news?
A little bit, limited doses. If I start feeling emotion, I turn it off. I like to watch BBC. It's about as good as a sleeping pill.
BBC.
BBC.
I like a little
bit.
BBC. I like to read some local stuff. I read some of them, no plugs for anybody, but I just try and pop around and get different perspectives. And hopefully that keeps me more of the best Cliff I can be.
Deb,
Well, let me just say this. I know we're running out of time. So, as a former hippie who smoked a lot of weed, took a lot of mushrooms, ate a lot of LSD, in addition to some other things, I am a person of love and tolerance. I think that should be our code.
Are you
And
joking?
so,
Deb's is dying
hold
over
on,
here.
hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. So now, in light of, I'm going to bring it full circle, because this news issue and the divisiveness in our country brings about so much hostility and anxiety and fear from the fear mongering of these news networks. We all need to help support Cliff and his investment
There he
opportunities and
is.
other members
Wow.
of the marijuana community, and we should just legalize it all so that we can all
I
chill
brought
out.
it full circle. I'm impressed with that. Debs, do you have a rebuttal to Sean's love
I
and
just
hope?
don't feel. Have y'all read the text chain today? Because
No, it was not full of love and hope.
I didn't
can
feel
tell you
it was
that.
full of love and acceptance and hope.
No,
No.
no, it was full of hostility and
Hostility.
latent
I was trying to
hatred.
be funny, but I don't know if it came across in my text.
Sean, were you amused?
Well, I was amused. I was laughing, and the thing was that of course I sent my great clip of Stripes of Sergeant Hulka telling Francis to lighten up because it was Dabs that seemed
No,
so
I was trying to
upset.
say I would help you through this white American male takedown, and you got upset.
Look, my masculinity is not affected by a woman being successful.
You've missed the entire. Okay, we can talk about this on text later. Yeah.
We're gonna need at least one more hour.
My daughter, by the way, is at Snow White. I'm about to go pick her up, so I'll let y'all know.
Yeah.
Well, she would be the only one at the
really.
theater.
Well,
Yeah,
at least she got a
it'll be
good
empty.
seat.
There it is.
It worked out
All
well.
right. Well, that's our show. We could use another hour or two, but we're gonna wrap it up here. Cliff, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for letting me come in. I appreciate
Had
it.
a good time.
A lot of fun.
Danny?
Cliff, I don't know if you can hear me. You're a great host. I hate I couldn't have been there in person, but I've really enjoyed you being on our show.
Thanks so
today.
much. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, Danny, that's another hour. Get me out of here.